Hey everybody, this is Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And my head is itchy. I got new posters up. 3 of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you're watching episode 92 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. The only news this week is that Pokemon Go came out in Canada, so
We're not talking about that.
I'm getting fit and getting good.
I don't care.
I've run for hours and hours and hours in the last week.
This is not Odyssey related. Let's move on.
So, Victoria, what are we talking about today? Because Victoria never gets off topic about anything that she likes in this podcast for 5 seconds.
Today we are reviewing Good Soil and Mortal Coil Part 1.
Yes. So, Good Soil, Odyssey episode for May? Yes. Episode 793, written by Phil Waller. What happens in it, Victoria?
In this episode, when all else fails, Jeff Lewis comes to save the day.
For what, a whopping 3 lines?
That's all you need to know, that Jeff Lewis came and he slayed and everything's
Victoria
good now.
came and destroyed my heart with the expectations that she set up for me for this episode.
Hey, every time Jeff Lewis comes around,
devastating.
It's a party.
Thank you, Victoria.
Devin now hates Jeff Lewis because of me.
It's your fault. We'll get to that later. What's this episode about?
So it's about missionaries it's about this missionary guy whose name I can't remember. And
William Leslie. Dr. William Leslie.
And he's a doctor and he's trying to, give people medicine while also ministering to them. And they're like, hey, I'll take the medicine, thanks. And he's like, wait, but what about... And then they leave. And then it just keeps on keeping on like this for a long time. And then he gets sick, and she gets, scarlet fever, I think, and...
Smallpox,
close enough. And then he gets married, and then, the great-grandson of a kid he used to hang out with comes in and says that he actually did do good stuff, even though he didn't think he did, and yeah.
His grandson.
Jeff Lewis comes and saves the day.
Close enough.
Mm-hmm.
So the episode is a kids' radio show, which I was definitely not expecting for it. I was didn't think it was going to be historical drama. I thought it was going to be a present day thing, since that's what most of our mission stories are on the OAC. So we changed it up a bit. A true historical story.
They did go there in the end of the episode.
Well, yeah, but that's not what the core of the story was. So we have Dr. William Leslie, and we have Miss Clara, and they see each other, they're smitten instantly. He was a guy, she was a girl.
I just want to say...
Could I make it any more cliche?
I just want to say, I listened to this episode 2 weeks after I watched Jessica Jones. So when he started flirting with her, I was having none of it. And then she was just so into it, and I was like, no, go away. He's awful. I liked him whenever he wasn't flirting with her. And then they ended up getting married, and I was like, oh, okay. No, it's not okay.
Who could have seen this coming?
And, yeah. Know what I did like? What plot, Odyssey episode that was historical, and they started flirting with each other, right away. But it was actually cute,
Sergeant
and it
York.
Wasn't creepy like it was in this.
Sergeant York?
Yeah, Sergeant York. It was just so cute in Sergeant York.
What was creepy about this one to you?
What?
What was creepy about this one to you?
I don't know, it's probably the fact that I listened to it after I watched Jessica Jones, and ever since, anybody flirting with anyone else after they first meet them has left me unsettled.
That's fair.
Yeah. I say David Tennant lurks in the background over
the romance part of it was scathingly predictable. And maybe my least favorite part of the episode.
Yeah.
As soon as
everything else was good, though.
The first line came out of her mouth, I'm like, I'm sure she will not be the predictable romantic interest here, and they're gonna get married and have kids later.
Guess what happened?
Speaking of predictable setups. As soon as Patrice started talking about how he was in Dr. Leslie's debt, I'm like, I can already see how this will later turn into an object lesson about Christ paying for our sinful debts, which I don't think they actually touched on explicitly, but it was still something that was very clearly like, here's a setup.
Alluding to it.
Yeah. So, Dr. Leslie meets this boy named Patrice, who's basically the only person who listens to what he has to say, and he's super stoked to get the Bible, except that Dr. Leslie's Bible is in French, because he speaks French. And so he's like, I want you to read the Bible, so I'm going to teach you French. And I was like, man, that is a long-term undertaking that he just threw himself into on a whim. Which makes me wonder what language they're speaking now. Swahili, maybe, then? I don't know what other language they'd have in common and also in common with the Belgian soldiers. But if so many Europeans are that fluent in Swahili at this point in history, how could there not already be Bibles that he would have in Swahili ready to distribute?
He spent all his money on medicine.
Yeah. The main story of the structure of the story that Victoria completely neglected to mention about Patrice's village of cannibals that was potentially infected with smallpox. And Dr. Leslie's like, I need to go save them. But his friend Captain Renault is like, no, you cannot go save them. They are evil.
He didn't have a heavy French accent.
Well, he had a moderate French accent.
And thank goodness they didn't try speaking French in this episode, because we know Odyssey's track record with French. Jason, we cat.
That wasn't French, Victoria.
Yeah, I know. What they were saying wasn't French either. That was closer what I said to French than what they said.
Touché. Anyways, that part of the story felt extremely reminiscent to me of Arizona Sunrise, because we had a missionary visiting an area with high tensions between the native population and the occupying military forces. The natives are considered savages, big surprise, and the military is jumping to condemn them all, but Mr. Missionary Man is ready to love and forgive his way to changing a whole culture. No similarities at all.
I thought it was going to be a lot more like Arizona Sunrise than it was,
So
and I
did
actually liked it. Like, not because it didn't feel like a watered down version of it. I don't even think it was similar enough to call it a watered down version, even though they did have a lot of similarities.
No, it was really only that one aspect of the story that was very similar, but everything else
calling this episode Arizona Sunrise is like calling Hunger Games Divergent, because they both have groups of people that are in groups.
Yeah, there's no similarities between Divergent and Hunger Games.
I will fight you, Devin. I will fight you and I will win.
Okay. So we move forward several years in the story all of a sudden. Clara and William got married. Didn't see it coming! Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, number one, exclamation mark. After this time skip, I have to say Patrice sure has not aged much in the apparent years that have passed. I wonder what his secret is.
Maybe he actually lives in Odyssey and that's why he hasn't aged at all. His actor went through puberty and then they had to find another voice actor who had to...
Yeah. It was Andre Robinson who played him, I believe, Patrice. Same person who played Walter in Walter's Flying Bus.
Nice. He got a better episode than Walter this time around, I'd say.
He did. So, William dies. So that was something I didn't expect to happen.
Yeah, I didn't expect that either. And he's just like, he hated everything and then he died. And I was like, okay, Cure Part 3 all over again.
And, yeah, well, I actually, the first thing I thought was like, okay, so it's the story of Jeremiah then. Is what we got, where he's like,
oh, yeah,
I went and I ministered.
But it's true.
I went and I ministered, and it didn't affect anything, and I will die thinking I didn't make a difference. But spoiler, he did make a difference.
That's why it sounded so familiar.
This is where... See, you may recall in the last episode, or maybe it was the one before, where Victoria
I think it was the one before.
Was mentioning this episode, and she said I really had to listen to it. And I was with the insinuation that someone was going to appear, something really exciting. And I was like, who, Jeff Lewis? And she's like, someone is really exciting. I'm like, who could it be? And so we have this story, which historically is taking place in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Now, everyone will remember that the only other time that the DRC has been heavily referenced and used in the show is during the Leonard Meltzner saga, which ended with Leonard and Everett moving back to the DRC. So after William Leslie's story ends, we hear Whit saying that he is going to travel to the Congo, where he learned that a certain village or villages had had some significant Christian effect because of Dr. Leslie, and that this is sort of the weird thing that he found. So he's now going to the Congo to find something involving a Christian influence on villages. In the episode where Victoria told me there was something very exciting about someone coming back. And I was like, I was on the bus, and my heart starts beating like a drum, and I'm like, no, it can't be. It all makes sense, though. This is literally the most perfect possible lineup for this all to happen. I can't believe it. And so Whit is broadcasting playing a previous broadcast from the Congo. So that was pretty cool, switching from that. So now Whit is now actively in Africa. Also, Jeff Lewis is there, and I'm like, I really hope that Jeff Lewis is not the only thing Victoria wanted me to hear, because the last few previous lines just shot my hopes up to the moon. My heart was going a mile a minute. And I looked as it's going on, and I'm looking at the clock, and the episode's almost over. I'm like, I don't think this is going where I hoped. There's not enough time left in the episode. And it didn't. Leonard and Everett Meltzner did not show up in the episode, and I was heartbroken. So I liked the fact that they made a double... What are you doing, Victoria? It's very noisy. They made a double connection with the title of the episode, with seeds and soil and stuff like that, both to the parable of the sower and the seeds falling among good soil, and also to the concept of sowing seeds for which God doesn't provide the harvest until much later, and or in ways that we can't see. So, yeah, I was really disappointed. Good job, Victoria. Got on the second try. So, I was very disappointed that Leonard and Everett didn't show up, but we still got Jeff. Although I did realize something depressing about Jeff Lewis as well as I was thinking about his appearances.
What?
Because I started realizing it seems pretty strongly like there's a good chance that Jeff was actually brought back to the show just in order to ease the transition into the creation of the OAC. Like, Jeff has been in 9 episodes total now. First Love, and then Life Expectancy Part 3, which explained his reappearance into the show. And then the pilot, Parts 1 and 2, which was an overseas missionary story, very similar to the OAC episodes, and that was the last episode before the OAC began. And every episode he's been in since has been an OAC episode. So there were hints of Connie Jeff stuff, but the OAC type stuff was the crux of the pilot, and every episode he's been in since has been an out of Odyssey missionary story, none of which have included Connie, nor has he been mentioned around Connie except for one line since. And I think that maybe he just came back as a character to help facilitate the transition into the stories they wanted to tell on the OAC, helping to explain the sudden heavy missionary focus that the episodes were going to take on. And the fact that they chose Jeff Lewis specifically to be this vehicle was really just so that they were like, hey, might as well, because then if we want to down the road, that also adds like a secondary possibility that we could do something with Connie, maybe, one day.
You know what, Devin?
It had honestly never occurred to me before, but I was looking at him like, that is depressingly likely looking at like his appearances on the show, and it's like,
Devin,
yeah.
Devin,
Mm-hmm.
You know what?
What?
You know what?
What?
I never asked for your opinion.
That's what I thought.
Your video is frozen.
Yeah, so's yours.
Hmm.
So, the video documentary starts with Bob on a farm so that he can talk to a farmer about what literally makes soil good.
Hey. Did Bob look at any tomatoes while on the farm?
I knew you were going to say that. He did not. No, they were actually hauling manure around and shoveling it. They're moving it using a UTV, a gator specifically, and it really brought me back to working on the research farm last year. And then we hear from some kids about what they do to serve their families and their churches. And then this guy talks about how being nearsighted and having versus not having glasses is like our perspective of our effect on reality versus God's perspective on our effect, which I guess works as a metaphor, but I think there'd be a lot better metaphors you could use, but whatever.
I think Waite uses one of those better metaphors in the Mortal Coil, which we'll get to next time.
And he was relating that to how Dr. Leslie couldn't see the effects of the seeds that he planted. And then we have the WebQuest information. So this is funny. They detail what actually happened to Dr. Leslie in real life. And there was an expedition to the DRC in 2010, which is what led people to learn about his effect there. And the group of missionaries was flown in by a Mission Aviation Fellowship pilot. So that part was actually technically accurate in the episode, since Jeff, who works for MAF, was the one who flew Whit in to investigate the village.
I told you, Jeff saved the day.
Leslie's medical efforts there were also very significant, not just his missionary ones, since other doctors and nurses took over his practice when he left the country, and it grew, and by the 1980s, the Vanga village was the healthcare standard for the entire country. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Dang.
There was a little video of Phil Lawler in the booth explaining the story of William Leslie to the actors, explaining the motivations and stuff before they recorded. And he said that he just found the story online one day and decided to make it an episode.
All right, then.
And
I've done the same thing with stories myself, so I can't.
There was a super cool callback. There was a page in the WebQuest
to Jeff Lewis,
which was an experiment with growing seeds. And the blurb at the beginning is from Eugene's perspective, and that he says that he found this experiment, quote, years ago while doing computer analysis of soil deposits around Odyssey. And that is a direct quote from The Perfect Witness, which explained Eugene recognizing that the mud on his car's wheel wells weren't typical local soil, but the fact that Eugene was doing that experiment was what led a few albums later to him sampling the soil in the tunnel under Wit's End during Darkness Before Dawn, leading him to discover the mineral's presence underneath there.
He also talks about his program with soil in A Little Credit, Please.
That's true.
Because I listened to that one yesterday.
When he's talking to Connie in the restaurant. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, Connie brings it up, I guess.
Yeah. Because he talked about his work on soil deposits like 6 times, and he asked her about school like 12 times or whatever.
Yeah. It was great foreshadowing. I love that.
It was. I was listening to it in the car, and I was like, oh my gosh, soil.
Phil Lawler named the leader of Patrice's village, Mobutu Sese Seko, after the corrupt military dictator who ruled the DRC from 1965 to 1997. Which I assume was just supposed to be a reference and not suggesting that the leader of his village went on to become the corrupt military dictator of the DRC.
Well, you never know with Odyssey. You never know with Phil Lawler.
That's true. So yeah. That is, those are the things that happened in the episode.
I liked Patrice.
Patrice.
Yeah. I didn't see the thing coming, or he'd never, like, inoculated himself before. So I liked that part.
Yeah, you'd think that he would have as a doctor.
Yeah, but he was just like, why didn't you tell me? You never asked. And I'm like, you two are meant for each other. You get that reference, Devin?
Yeah. It's... Why wouldn't you have given yourself the smallpox vaccine?
So you have more for other people who need it.
Was it really that rare back then? I mean, it wasn't that technical. Look at how it was discovered, okay? They're like, hey, this milkmaid isn't getting smallpox because she hangs out with the cows all day. Or it was cowpox, but it's still smallpox.
And then they started putting cows in everyone's houses.
It was the first vaccine ever invented. Anyways.
I think everything in this episode was pretty good. There were some pretty predictable parts, and the romance was kind of... Yeah. Other than that, I liked it a lot. It was kind of like Jeremiah meets Arizona Sunrise.
I thought I had a note about this, but I don't see it anywhere. So in terms of like the themes of, oh, that's what it was. I wrote it in my comment on the OAC, but I didn't write it in my notes for reviewing.
Oh, by the way, if you've ever written a comment to Devin before on the OAC and he hasn't checked it, don't feel bad about it. He just doesn't check his comments.
Well, I did last time, because I did respond to them. I checked to see if they responded back, and they hadn't seen it yet, so. What I was saying is that I really love this type of theme in terms of looking at, you know, the ways that we plant seeds and the ways that, the ways that God works through us through the efforts that we do, and that sometimes we see those effects, sometimes we don't. For a while, sometimes we never do. We've seen that in a number of episodes, such as Bernard and Jeremiah, The Pact.
You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some. The Pact, Operation Dig Out, and to a certain degree, in a slightly different way, Glass Darkly. Yeah.
I hate that episode.
Oh, it gets under my skin.
We should review that episode one day.
I appreciate what it's trying to do.
I feel like we don't review enough episodes that we dislike.
It's not like I dislike what the episode did, per se, because I appreciate what it was doing. It just makes me angry conceptually, because
Same.
I know what happened, but Trent doesn't know what happened, and Dr. Hawthorne doesn't know what happened.
Only I hate that's that called dramatic irony.
Exactly what I was gonna say.
Look it up, kids.
Communicate, kids. That's in every piece of fiction. That's the lesson
So
at the end of the day that solves your problems. Just open up your heart and communicate.
I was re-listening to the album with like First Things First and Dinner Role Models and all those ones. Can't remember what it's called.
It's album 59.
Yeah.
Taking the Plunge.
And I totally forgot that they had the Communicate rap in there.
Yep.
I was at work when I was listening to it and I almost started yelling at work.
Good stuff.
Frustrating.
Good stuff.
No, not good. Not good.
Final thoughts on the episode, Victoria?
I already said my final thoughts. I just have to give it a rating. You rate. I will think.
Overall, there wasn't a whole lot that was particularly wrong with the episode.
I'd say a solid 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like we said, the romance was arguably the worst part of the episode. It was, like I said before,
I think it's more than arguably the worst part.
Scathingly predictable, I believe, are the words I used earlier. It was just, it's like,
Bad.
hey, he's a guy, and look, there's one girl in the entire
the flirting
episode.
Hurt me.
They're immediately going to start
flirting.
flirting and fall in love with no problems and then get married and have a bunch of kids because, hey, there's one female in this story, so obviously she has to marry someone, am I right?
Like, what I love so much in Sergeant York was, like, she didn't like it when they flirted with them. She was just like, go away, and then she left. Like, Gracie was awesome. I loved her.
When William was like, I was dreaming that you would come to save me, I was like, oh.
Yeah, I was too. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of, like, the love lines in Star Wars.
Except those are good and sarcastic, and this was, like...
No, the ones in... No, I'm talking about, like, Star Wars 2.
Oh, okay, that makes... I thought you meant,
yeah,
like...
I'm not talking about, like, Han and
That's where
Leia,
I thought you were going. I was like, what are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about Anakin and Padme.
Yeah, in episode 2. That's fair. I'll give you that one.
I hate that. It's coarse and rough and
gets everywhere.
Gets everywhere. You just say, like, gets everywhere.
Sweet.
Your hands, though.
Sweet talk to me about sand. Oh, Anakin.
The classic, are you an angel? Never let George Lucas write stuff like that ever again.
So, apart from the romance aspect of the episode, It was alright for the most part, you know. Jeff Lewis did appear for a number of seconds.
Yeah. That's all I need.
Jeff
Lewis always gets an automatic one star on the episode.
I appreciated like the combination of the historical drama part and then included the clips of Whit actually going to the Congo, which was cool since he was apparently researching Dr. Leslie's influence in the area, which, if not for the incredibly miraculous thing that happened, would have probably very likely been a complete failure of a trip. But, you know, it's not like Whit's tight on money these days. What else?
Devin.
Yes.
Devin. Mm-hmm. If something were hypothetically to happen between Connie and Jeff, Kathy would write it, wouldn't she?
Probably.
Are you friends with Kathy?
Victoria.
Yeah?
I'm not messaging Kathy Buchanan on Facebook to ask for spoilers, if that's what you're insinuating.
I didn't get the chance to say it, so you don't know for sure if that's what I was going to say.
But for the most part, the episode, it just felt very like, oh, this is what's happening. Like, there wasn't anything terribly, really shockingly new or funny or compelling or interesting that really intrigued me. It was, you know, there's stuff that was different, but it was still pretty like, oh, okay, this is happening. We're going along. It's the end of the episode. It was pretty standard.
Do new episodes come out every Thursday?
Yes.
There's a new episode out then, isn't there?
Yeah, I know, but we haven't reviewed Mason County yet, so you can't listen to it yet. I have to listen to the
new episode.
I'm gonna give this episode 3.0.
Huh. I give it higher than you. Yeah. I didn't expect that. Anyway, next episode.
Yeah, so let's talk about an episode that I think will get us a little bit more excited. The Mortal Coil, Part 1. And now here we are to talk about The Mortal Coil, Part 1, Episode 211, written by Paul McCusker. Victoria?
So, in this episode, Whit creates a program in the Imagination Station that shows life after death, and it varies what you see depending on whether you're a Christian or not. And when Whit first goes into it, he dies, kind of. He goes into a coma, and he sees Jenny and Jerry, and he's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to live. I just want to hang out with my awesome family. And then Jana and Jason show up, and they're like, what, we're not good enough for you? And Whit's like, not really. I mean,
that's not part one, but...
And then that's where part one ends.
That's not where part one ends. Jerry and Jana and Jason are all not in part one.
Well, whatever. Spoilers. What do you think's going to happen in part 2? I think there's one character that we don't know at all named Jason's going to show up, and he's only going to be in that episode and never show up in the entire show ever again.
That's probable. Okay, so Mortal Coil. This episode...
I have 2 things I want to say, before we start. Okay, one, whenever something happens with one of Connie's grandmothers, bad things with the Imagination Station always follow.
You mean her one single grandmother that this is all about?
No, and then there's also, like... There's
Same grandmother. Same grandmother.
Okay, whenever something bad happens with her grandma, bad things happen with the Imagination Station.
That is actually one of my first points. Not specifically that, but the continuity
and
about...
Also, how does this program work? Because it works different for Whit and different for other people. Because, like, is it just, like, processing who the person is when it starts showing them scenes throughout their life? And then it doesn't, like... And then it shows them, like, what everything is like afterwards or something like that? Because it showed Whit's life for him, but Eugene, when he's talking about it, he makes it sound like it just, like, jumped into the whole, like, afterlife thing. So Eugene didn't see, like, any flashbacks, and it doesn't mention if Tom saw any flashbacks or not.
It's because Eugene is young little fetus, and he doesn't have any memories. He just skips straight to death.
No, that annoys me so much, because Tom's just like, I'm gonna take it because I've lost more people than you have. And I was just like, okay, Tom, hold up. Eugene has been through so much more stuff than you,
we'll talk
and
about
he has lost so much more than you.
Well,
even though
more.
your wife's died and your son's died, and Agnes is probably in like Hillendale right now. But like Eugene has lost his parents. He doesn't even know about Everett. He's lost like all his family, and he just has the worst life ever. So you are in no place, Thomas Riley, to say that he has not had a hard life, and you have. He's had a harder life.
We'll
than
get
you.
there earlier, but no, I would argue that Tom has lost a lot more. You literally listed many more people for Tom than you did for Eugene. Eugene's lost his parents. Tom has lost his wife, almost lost his second wife. He's lost his son. He's lost his father. He's probably lost his sister.
Eugene, though, his life is
He's
more
lost
tragic.
his parents.
His life is more tragic. And he's younger than Tom. He lost them at a young age. And Leonard wasn't a very good dad.
Yeah, which doesn't help your point. And also the fact that age does factor into it, just not the amount of loss, because as Tom says, it's not just about how much loss you've experienced, but also the perspective on that loss that age grants you. But
well, I remember I want to do a verses in the future, because I've been listening to a lot of pre-Christian Eugene episodes lately, and I also listened to The Time Has Come and A Little Credit Please the other day after I listened to this, because it really made me want to. And also, like, Turning Point and Naturally, I assumed. I want to do a What If Katrina Had Never Become a Christian versus.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
I'm going to write that down before I
write it in the notebook. Anybody who's listening, you never heard us say that. You never heard
anything. Peek behind the curtains. Anyways, so.
That's basically how it works. I'm like, hey, why don't we do this? And Devin's like, okay.
Yeah. So, this episode, from the top, Connie and Eugene chatting. Whit is up all night working on the imagination station, something secret. The events of this episode, I'm sure, are what everyone was referring to at the beginning of a most intriguing question in album 44, when they're worried that Whit has gone into mad scientist mode again because he's up all night working on inventions. Because now in 44, it's like, oh, this is bad. It's just like last time when Whit was doing all this, and then he died. So, you know.
That's what that was alluding to? I thought it was just saying Whit's crazy in general.
Well, I'm pretty sure. I mean, he does all that a lot, but I think they were most specifically alluding to this incident, because this is probably the worst incident of it since Whit basically died in the process.
I'd agree with that. And then Best Intentions are like, wait, you had a heart attack. He's like, it was barely a murmur. And I'm like, dude,
you were in a coma
go
for 24 hours.
Your heart stopped at one point. Go lie down, read your book, but don't stress yourself. And like, poor Dr. Morton. I can see why she's probably retired by this point because of like her poor health, because of Whit's poor health. And that's why we have like a new doctor now. And then Dr. Morton's just like, okay, I'm giving you all my patients' files, so you're gonna be their new doctor, but there's this one shifty family, so watch out for them, because they will not listen to anything you say. They will rip out their own IV, and they will run all the way down to tell Holly what she needs to know and that they love her. And
yeah, geez. I think, dealing with all of Isaac's shenanigans was more than enough for Dr. Morton, quite frankly.
She's like super mom. Can we both agree on that?
Yeah. I feel like Eugene is fairly justified in making his quip at the beginning at Connie about her curiosity concerning which secret programs that he designs, given that last time this exact same thing happened, it got both of them fired. And she's like, I mean, Eugene.
Last time it was partially Eugene's fault too. So.
Partially, but honestly it was mostly Connie's fault.
True, but Eugene kind of made it sound like he didn't have any of the blame at all. And he did, so.
As you brought up earlier, I really love the continuity that we get in terms of Mildred Kendall in this episode, because it starts out with Father's Day in album 14, where Bill is passing through town to visit Mildred because she isn't doing too great. And then we move to this episode where the program was inspired because Mildred was taking a turn for the worse and Connie was musing about it. And then finally until in album 24, and Mildred finally coming to Odyssey and then dying in A Touch of Healing / Where Is Thy Sting. Amazing episodes.
I realized while listening to this episode that I've never added Connie and Eugene to my list of favorite guy-girl platonic relationships, and I'm like, why haven't I done that? Because those two, as much as I, like, talk about how much I love, like, Jay and Riley and Jared and Dwayne, Eugene and Connie easily have my favorite relationship in all of Odyssey. And, like, I know it's not part 2 yet, but part 2 is, like, one of my all-time favorite Connie-Eugene moments.
Oh, that's true. Oh, that's a good scene.
It's just...
But we'll get there.
The entire scene is just so good.
We'll get there.
So good, so good. And I also think that might be the first time Eugene has called Connie, but I could be wrong. Connie part 2 doesn't count.
I am curious about why Whit needs to remove panels on the Imagination Station itself in order to install a new program, because we know it's hooked up to Mabel in the control room, but he's like, I'm working on a program here, let me put these sheet panels back onto the machine itself. I like the quote where Connie's like, the death program sounds scary, and Whit's like, that's my point, Connie, it shouldn't be scary. This episode is one of the few instances where Connie was super right and Whit was super wrong, even if not for the reasons that they expected it to be. And it's interesting because I was thinking about how Whit putting a little too much faith in his technology is actually one of his few character flaws, I would say, and that also that pairs with a regular pattern of Tom helping balance that out with him, because he does it in here to little avail in time that Tom helps him out with it. Didn't think of the WE, but that's another one too. I was also thinking of Eugene Returns trilogy when Whit is trying to upload everyone's Eugene memories in order to cure his amnesia, but Tom won't do it because he knows that only God can bring Eugene's mind back, and Whit once again realizes that Tom was right after the fact, as he expresses to Dr. Foster in the end.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'll always prefer Jack and Whit's relationship to Jack and Tom, but...
Whit and Tom?
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'll always prefer Jack and Whit's relationship to Whit and Tom. Yeah. But, yeah, they are good. They're a good mix. They balance each other very well. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want to call them Moirails, because Jack and Whit, but...
and of course, on that topic, like, it also comes to mind Peace on Earth, which is touted.
I thought about saying Peace on Earth, but it was more like sort of just similar. Whit being busy. It wasn't him relying on his technology. He was just like making phone calls and stuff.
Yeah, but it's the same area of things in terms of Tom being the one to be like, Whit, shush, pap.
Whit, shut up.
Yeah. Okay, so I need to tell everyone about...
Whit, shut up, come outside and stare at the snow with me and you will like it!
I need to tell you all about my theory, now that we're at this point in the episode, my theory about this episode the first time, because it made so much sense, and I spent most, if not all of the first part thinking that this is where the episode was going, and I was completely wrong about
How
it,
old
but
were you
it's
the
still
first time you
so
listened to
plausible.
it?
Sorry?
How old were you the first time you listened to it?
Probably like 13, 14, maybe.
Okay, carry on.
So we know that Whit has made a program about what death means for a Christian, and that he specifically made it to teach Connie. However, Whit is really cagey about, up to this point, about what the specifics of what form the program takes. And Connie gets to use it first, even though Whit ostensibly protests just a little. She gets into the Imagination Station. It sounds like it's starting up, and then it just seems to just die out. And Connie swaps places with Whit, and then he goes into a coma, and he starts getting worse by the minute. My theory...
You thought that this was the adventure?
Yeah, my theory was that Wit was pulling an Isaac the Chivalrous / Inspiration Station reset AU thing here, where it only seemed like the Imagination Station started up and sputtered down, but that everything after that point, because you hear the machine like fully start up and then it dies down, so I thought everything after that moment was actually part of the adventure, and Connie was still inside the Imagination Station, and so her swapping out, Wit getting in, going into a coma, all of that was part of the adventure, and Wit was going to die in part 2. In the end, it would turn out that this entire thing was the lesson to teach Connie about the meaning of death, because that's what the program was for. It was to teach that, and specifically to teach Connie. It would make so much sense.
I would argue that Connie is not in the episode enough for that.
Well, I mean, that's just, at first, like, as soon as it was happening, I was like, this is what's happening. I figured it out. And then as it started to go through the episode, it seemed less and less likely. And then finally I'm like, okay, I guess this isn't where it was going. But I still feel like it makes a lot of sense, given the setup. Yes. So I am actually really curious then, given that that isn't what happened actually, which I still think would have been interesting. Would have been great. Makes so much sense. I am curious about what would have happened to Connie in the program then. She was a Christian, but she hadn't really ever lost...
would have died.
But she hadn't lost anyone close to her, as far as we know. So I guess this instance maybe falls under the whole God working through the Imagination Station malfunctioning umbrella.
I think that's why the Imagination Station didn't work for her.
It's a different form than what we were just talking about in the Imagination Station Revisited and Hide and Seek and When One Door Closes, but I guess this does count for that.
No, it does. I think I think it didn't work for her because she hadn't really lost anyone who was really close to her. And that's like what it was focusing on for everybody else.
What I will not count under this umbrella is the Imagination Station not working for Wit in the Imagination Station books, because that is not an act of God, but an act of bizarre plot contrivance.
I think you say an act of stupidity. What I want to know is how Wit doesn't know how the adventure works when he made it.
Because the machine has a mind of its own. I mean,
no, that's not how that works.
I mean, to be fair,
that's not how that works.
I guess it
happens, and Wit's like, "Huh? How did this happen?" I'm like, "You programmed it. Figure it out."
It kind of makes sense in the way that, like, conceptually around how the Imagination Station works. That it's not like a VR experience where he's programming everything, and then you're on a on rails adventure where everything's scripted out precisely, but that he puts things in, and then there's a fair amount of virtual intelligence going into extrapolating.
Would you say it's artificial intelligence?
I didn't. I said virtual intelligence, which is a big difference.
Would you say that?
I mean, they've kind of skirted around the idea. Wit did say to Eugene in Bite of Applesauce, he did say that Mabel had installed on her limited artificial intelligence.
I'll take that as a yes.
So, I mean, yeah, because we know that things can come out of the Imagination Station that are more than what you know from what you put into it, because it processes data in surprising or unexpected ways. I mean, that's what the whole point of the research program was, which Wit used in which Eugene used in Darkness Before Dawn, and as implied for next episode, that Wit was using to lead to the events of the Imagination Station books, interestingly. We'll talk about that next time. I'm so
mad. I just found cellophane in my room, and I gave Gabe her birthday present already today. I missed some.
So.
Predictions.
I don't remember where I was going with that point. Oh yeah, you brought up the point.
The book. The Imagination Station book. Which should know how his stupid adventure works.
Probably. I'll give you that.
Like, I'll say, maybe Connie has been in the adventure. Maybe she's been in the Imagination Station ever since that episode, and that's why June died. And that would explain why Whit doesn't know how his stupid adventure works, and she almost lost Mitch, and that would have, been part of it. And get out your crackpot theories, kids. We're going in deep.
Literally, we're going another level deeper, because this is literally Inception now. But consider this, maybe... Because think about what Whit actually says. He says the program startled him. Now, that could mean it startled him because he didn't know what was going to happen. But...
I think it startled him because he saw Jenny.
Exactly. It could just startle him with, the realisticness and just how real it was to him in a way that he didn't expect. Which means that he did actually know what the program was going to do.
Do you think it was, third person or first person?
Probably first person. I don't think it was an out-of-body experience. Not till part 2, at least, I guess.
Whit's like, hey, that's what the back of my head looks like.
Yeah. So, the writing in this episode is so good. Every scene with Tom and Whit... better. Every scene with Tom and Whit is so well written. The best part of this episode on an emotional level, by far. Every scene with Tom and Whit together. Especially at the end of part 1. It's great to connect this episode to Clara and Recollections after having just reviewed them, to see that Jenny really is Whit's weak spot when it comes to making selfish and stupid decisions. She is what can move him to
He's like, I'm doing this, Tom, and you can't stop me. I was thinking he would have already been a little bit upset with Tom, because Tom didn't want him to do it. But then Tom's like, okay, you go in, I'm going to take you out. And it's like, I don't want to take you out, but whatever. Say whatever you want, I'm going in anyway. And then I was thinking, Whit's going to re-see the scene with Tom and Officer David Harley, since he's re-seeing everything, where Tom made that sick freaking burn. And he would be like, no, what? I don't want to be friends with Tom anymore. Because he said that to me that one time, and that was really mean. And...
Anyways,
this episode is dedicated to the memory of Hal Smith's wife.
Yes, Louise Smith.
Also, the Odyssey episode is dedicated to her memory also. I was talking about Oddcast.
So, like I was saying, connecting this episode to Clara and Recollections, we really do see the pattern of how Whit's weak spot is Jenny when it comes to making stupid and selfish decisions, because she is what can move him to uncharacteristic and irrational behavior, whether it is trying to steal Clara from the Portlands, to being so rude towards Tom and Harley, to ignoring, in this episode, Tom's good sense to basically try and commit technological suicide in the Imagination Station.
What could go wrong? Oh wait, he's in a coma now. That was dumb.
It took me a really long time to understand Tom's quip about Connie's out-of-order sign on the Imagination Station. When he's like, my sentiments exactly, and realizing that he was making a joke about out of order as in death before you've died. Misordering of experiencing the afterlife before death.
Oh.
Yeah, took me a long time to get that.
It's really subtle.
So, Whit goes into the Imagination Station. He has a whole bunch of flashbacks, so we've talked about this a number of times. So we start out with a few generic American kid memories, like singing hymns
I pledge allegiance to the flag of America.
Yeah, we hear generic...
We hear Fiona. Oh, I love that part.
We hear generic American kid memories like singing hymns and getting into fistfights and chanting the weird dystopian propaganda chant that is the Pledge of Allegiance. And then we hear clips from Thank You God, from Young Whit, Fiona, and Harold. And then it cuts to
from the triangle.
We hit to the famous "A Day Which Will Live in Infamy." That clip from Truman?
Operation Takeout?
I don't know. One of the presidents of the U.S. after Pearl Harbor.
Oh.
And then it cuts to rescue from Manitoba Point when they came under fire and Whit's being called up for service. And then we, interestingly, as we've addressed many times before, cut to an unnamed Jack Wilbur Allen introducing Whit to Jenny, whom he had met at the Pasadena Public Library. And this line, of course, would go on
and
to
then
be...
we hear, it's a girl!
Yeah.
Jana being born. Jana's second oldest, right? Because Jason's the youngest and Jerry's the oldest.
Yes. This line...
Because, like, little Jason, and he's like, come on, let's show Jason our bell, and Jason's like, Jerry! And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Because he's the judge,
so cute. That's so cute.
And because Jana was still a teenager when Jerry died, as what talks about in A Member of the Family. So that line would go on to be directly written into the triangle, word for word, although the voice would obviously be different. And then we hear Jana's birth, like Victoria said, and some kids singing, Whit finding out that Jerry was killed in action, and then Jenny's death clip from Recollections. And then Jenny appears. John. She appears.
And then she's like, John? And he's like, Jenny. And he, like, really drags out the name.
I'm honestly surprised that Whit did not try and resurrect his dead wife earlier like this using the imagination station.
What's wrong with you?
When I think about it.
I
mean,
it's so. I found this line so creepy. There's there's two lines that I find really, really creepy in this. One is in part 1, and one is in part 2. One's from Whit, one's from Eugene.
Well, talk about the first one because we're talking about part 1 right now.
And so it's when Tom's like, "Hey, is everything okay?" He's like, "Everything's great, Tom. It's wonderful." And Tom's like, "Okay, yeah, taking you out now." And then also, like, the death whisper from Eugene in part 2 when he says Connie's name, and it's so creepy. Connie! And I was trying to imagine, like, Will saying that and just, like, whispering it, and everyone's staring at him in the recording booth, like, what is wrong with you?
I really wish that we could have heard what Tom experienced in his few seconds in the imagination station, especially since, as we know...
the ambiguity. I think he saw his first wife and Timmy.
And probably his dad and his sister, Becky, and Agnes before her depression and amnesia and all that stuff, dementia and such.
I always forget that Tom has a sister.
Yeah.
Even though, like, her daughter's in the secret room, and she's in... album 4 with Tom and stuff.
Her granddaughter.
Yeah.
Jamie Martin is his grandniece.
And you and I, like, acted out the entire episode where it's him and his sister.
We did do that for a Sunday school lesson. It's true. I scripted the full episode and then we acted it out for Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
Don't copyright strike us. There was no payment involved. We only performed it for, like, 12 6-year-olds. It's fine.
They don't even remember it.
It's
I think
true.
I can guarantee that.
They probably didn't remember it 5 minutes after it was done. So
that's probably true.
As we know, a few seconds in the imagination station can go a long way, so we don't know exactly how much Tom experienced from his perspective in there. So I really wish we knew what happened. I think that, contrary to what Victoria said earlier, I think Tom was absolutely right about him needing to be the one to try the program. But in terms, like you were saying, in terms of it being because he's had so many friends and family pass on before him, like Whit has, you should remember that Eugene's entire family is presumably dead at this point, and Eugene has no other friends outside of Whit's End. Granted, he is still not a Christian, and so Tom was still the only choice for trying to recreate what Whit's experience in the station was.
But everyone Eugene cares about is dead. And Tom still has, like, tons of friends.
That's, like, 2 people, though, besides the people at Whit's End.
Well, he also lost his one true love.
Margaret Hoffmeyer?
At camp. No, he met at camp.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, no, it was Connie had a crush on him, not the other way around.
Well, he could have a crush on her for all we know.
I don't think he did. So
yeah, he never says anything. It would be awkward if he says something. I'm so glad they changed that line from, like, for those of you who don't know, in the end of Champ of the Camp, Eugene runs off to tell Whit that Connie used to have a crush on him. In the original draft of that script, he ran off to tell Katrina that Connie used to have a crush on him. But then in the final draft, they're like, actually, let's change that. And I'm so glad they changed it.
Katrina's gonna start acting towards Connie like Juvia towards Lucy, peeking, like
a love rival.
Yeah, glaring at her from behind corners and stuff.
Having fantasies about Connie and Eugene hooking up.
So as we as we come to as we come to the end of the episode, it's honestly a chilling, even terrifying scene when Tom frantically scrambles out of the station and he screams at Eugene to erase the program because it's too dangerous to exist.
The episode ends with Whit flatlining, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which is exactly what I was going to say next. I love how this episode just ends with Whit dying. Like, I can't imagine, and I actually know now because I read it in the guide, what people thought after part 1 aired. Because it's just like, Whit dies.
I just remembered. I wanted to open this episode up with, "Hi, this is Victoria." And you were going to be like, "And this is Devin."
Well, you forgot. Welcome. Too late now.
Can we film a new opening?
I thought it was really funny that how Chuck Bolte refers to this as Whit's special adventure, because I honestly feel like the front of this episode warrants an Always Sunny episode title card style thing, cutting from Whit telling Connie he'll be just fine, and then it like puts up like the Always Sunny screen where it's like,
oh, it'll be just Connie, or Connie's like, "I have a bad feeling about this," and
it's like, "I'll be fine.
I'll be just fine, Connie," and then it cuts to him flatlining.
Yeah.
Hard cut to him flatlining.
So there's a number, unsurprisingly, there's a number of bonus things about this that talks about in the official guide, so I'll read those. Whit's brush with mortality. The Mortal Coil is one of the most popular Adventures in Odyssey episodes, but it was also one of the more controversial. Even before the show aired, we knew that it would trigger a lot of listener responses because of its cliffhanger ending, so we put into place some unusual efforts to help offset the intensity of the fans' reactions. We asked the local stations to have their on-air announcers warn parents about the show, suggesting that they listen before allowing their children to hear it. We also had executive producer Chuck Bolte replace Chris Anthony for the wrap-up at the end of Part 1, hinting at the happy ending that would come when he said Whit's adventure would continue the following week. What we didn't fully realize was the effect the show would have by airing the Saturday before Thanksgiving, in parentheses, which is a real big deal in the US, which meant that a lot of families wouldn't be home for the conclusion the next Saturday. The letters and phone calls came. Kids begged us, saying, "Please don't kill Mr. Whittaker," while a few parents were annoyed that we would put their children through a week of suspense. Which,
oh my God.
Author's note.
I have to wait a year to get the plot twist, to get the cliffhanger, like, unmessed up in a darker shade of magic, so you can wait a week.
Yeah, okay. If you think about every TV show that's out there, they always end in cliffhanger. You don't get parents writing in to say, "I'm annoyed that you ended this with the cliffhanger. My kids were really put through the ringer for a week." Do they write into every TV show that they watch to tell the producers?
I hope Once Upon a Time gets letters like that every end of season.
Anyways, while a few parents were annoyed that we would put their children through a week of suspense. Despite all this, the episodes proved powerful, and many listeners wrote in to thank us for producing them. And the letter that they gave to the stations that were airing it is in the guide here on page 212. 223, 218, 214, 212. In very tiny. Memo from Paul McCusker.
Is it a picture of the letter?
It is a picture of the letter.
Show it.
There. Now you don't have to read it. Oh, there it is.
Read it yourself, kids.
Yeah. I won't read the header, but, hi guys, just a quick note to flag the forthcoming Adventures in Odyssey episode called The Mortal Coil, to air November 21st and 28th. These two shows chronicle what happens when Whit creates an imagination station program that attempts to capture life after death in a way that kids will understand. Unfortunately, he does it too well and it backfires on him. By the end of the first part, our cliffhanger, we have every reason to think that Whit has died, though Chuck Bolte, our executive producer, does drop a hint that Whit's adventure will continue next time. I wanted to warn you that these two shows are, ellipses, intense, italicized. We've built a lot of suspense into what happens to Whit with a number of references to his personal history, family, and experiences. It may be a little too exciting for our younger listeners, particularly with that cliffhanger ending. Since we didn't do a disclaimer of our own, for some reason, we'd like to ask that your on-air announcer say the following before the program. Announcer. Hi. Oh, sorry. Hi. This
I like
is...
your voice crack. That was very, like, Cecil-ish.
Thank you. I realize we need to do this calmly, like you were just saying. Announcer. Hi. This is insert name. Before we start our adventure in Odyssey, singular, I'd like you to make sure that your parents are with you. This is a very special program, so if your parents aren't in the room, now is the time to get them. With respect to the cliffhanger ending of the first episode, we'd like you to defer giving anything away to your listeners before airing the second episode. If you get calls, please instruct your personnel to tell them to be sure to listen the following week, and they'll find out what happens. If you absolutely have to say something as a last resort because someone is threatening grievous bodily harm, I suppose you can mention the hint that Wit's adventure will continue next time. It couldn't be Wit's adventure if he's dead, right? Well, it can, because there's life after death. That's the entire point of the episode, Paul. We hope these 2 episodes will keep your listeners tuned.
I hope Paul's watching this.
We'll keep
and he's like, darn you, Devin.
We hope this is why you wrote me to be... Well, I turned out to be... You turned out
to be a nice guy.
Paul made me into a scumbag, but then Kathy and Nathan made me the best character ever. Ha! We hope these 2 episodes will keep your listeners tuned, even on a holiday weekend. Let us know how it works out. See, America, if you didn't put your Thanksgiving in November, this wouldn't be a problem. If you put it in October like sensible people, there you go. Anyways, other things from the guide. Sound bites. The Mortal Coil was actor Walker Edmiston's favorite episode. Walker remembers a moment with his character, Tom Riley, when his character, Tom Riley, had a lengthy scene at Wit's bedside. The feelings between Hal and me at the moment, being close friends, brought something to the show that you don't normally feel in acting unless the true emotions get in there. When I read this speech, this monologue, I thought, I can get through that. I said, let's not rehearse. Let's just turn the machine in. I assume that's supposed to say on. That's the way we recorded it, without any practice at all. We got that raw emotion. And then, my take, Paul McCusker. We wrote the first part of the Mortal Coil to be put away in case Hal Smith died. The plan was to record part 1, and then put it away until we needed it, but we liked this story so much that we decided to finish it. Sadly, Hal's wife, Louise, died. Sadly, Hal's wife, Louise, died weeks before the recording, so we were worried about how Hal might react to the content. Being the professional he was, Hal insisted the show must go on. We dedicated that show to Louise. I mean, I guess when you're up there, it kind of is like, I guess this makes sense that they're making this episode in case I die. I found it more interesting that I'd completely forgotten that that was the case and that they had actually had this in place for the eventuality that if Hal Smith died, they're going to be like, okay, we are actually going to kill Wit then with this canned episode.
I didn't know that. Do you think they just wrote that and they're like, hey, good morning, Hal. Hey, morning, Paul. How are you? Good. I wrote an episode in case you die.
Yeah. That must have been an awkward conversation to have.
How's your wife?
Behind the scenes, the Mortal Coil. When Wit is in the imagination station, thinking back through his life, we hear the line, quote, I'd like you to meet Jenny. I think you've seen her at the Pasadena Library, end quote. Years later, when The Triangle, album 36, told that full story, we made sure that character Jack Allen said this exact phrase. This way, it sounded like Wit's imagination station adventure was flashing forward to a scene from The Triangle. Sound designer Jonathan Crow delivered this line in The Mortal Coil, but Odyssey producer Marshall Younger played young Jack in The Triangle. I'd forgot that Marshall was Jack in The Triangle. I didn't catch a word of that.
Give me more young Jack and young Wit.
Well, apparently we're going to get it. Young Jack at least confirmed. I assume young Wit is coming along with that.
Was it book or audio? Or was it both?
Audio they were talking about, but they also said about the plans for a series of young Wit books. I'm sure they won't be as good as the Imagination Station novels, but, you know, second best.
Well, I mean, they don't have Count Chocula or whoever the villain
Lord
is.
Darkthorn, yeah.
That's
oh,
an
Victoria,
amazing name.
just wait till you read the first chapter of the second book and you find out who Albert is.
I don't want to. I can't. It better be Albert Einstein. I bet it is.
Well, that would be interesting.
It's super dumb.
Okay, final thought. No, we don't have to, because this is part 1. So I wonder what we're going to rate this.
Predictions. I think Wit's going to die.
I think that Wit is already dead, technically speaking.
I think that Eugene is not going to use the adventure.
Yeah, I think he deleted it. I think Witch Children will never show up on this show except for Jana. Witch super dead.
Yeah, Jana's his only...
Connie...
Have they even mentioned Jason before this episode?
Yeah.
When?
We were talking about this. I asked you about this, actually, just a little while ago, when the first time that they mentioned Jason was by name. And, what was it? I figured out, was it album 7? Yeah, it was album 7. They're like, you'll go in Uncle Jerry's old room, you'll go in Uncle Jason's old room.
Oh. Okay. I don't know why, but like listening to part 2 and Jason said like, I don't know, I might even stay in Odyssey for a while. I like it here. And I was just like, how have I never paid attention to this line before?
I didn't. So. I always, when we do 2-part reviews like this, the stuff we've already heard, I don't listen to the second part in advance just so I can keep straight what happens in which part in my head for the review. As long as one of us knows, right? Okay, so we'll wrap up our thoughts and stuff on this next time, I guess. So what
0 stars for both of us.
Yeah, terrible episode.
Isn't Immortal Coil like your favorite episode?
Well, it's not anymore.
Next to Life Expectancy and Best Intentions and...
It used...
Out of the Woods.
Mortal Coil used to be my favorite drama episode before Life Expectancy came along.
Also The Top Floor.
That's my favorite action-adventure, yeah.
I really like A New Era.
What are we doing next time, Victoria? We've already kind of talked about it, but...
Book.
Yeah, which book?
Voyage with Vikings is the name of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Probably something dumb that's alliteration.
It is Attack at the Arena.
Oh, I was right!
It is the second book of the Imagination Station series. Or like, man, this plot is just so interesting.
Wait, isn't this...
It's the Telemachus
one?
Yes.
Hopefully that means it's a little bit better.
Because remember, they need the monk's silver chalice because Lord Darkthorn is angry, and they need it before the full moon.
I don't want to talk about this anymore. I can feel my brain slipping out of my ears.
So that's what we'll be talking about next time.
I have to actually read it this time.
Yeah, no audiobook this time. So that's what we're doing next time. Until then, I've been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Melsner. Thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube.
And I'm Victoria.
And we'll see y'all later.
Goodbye.
Bye.